You're listening to the House Hacking Podcast, the blueprint for one of the best financial life hacks there is. House hacking. If you are looking to get ahead financially or learn about the easiest way to get started with real estate investing, then you are in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of individuals from all walks of life that use house hacking to eliminate their housing costs and accelerating their path to financial independence. Your number one place for all things house hacking.
Sarah, I'm so excited to have you on. I've been following you on Instagram for quite a while, and I really love your story. But, I mean, before we get into it, how you doing? And for folks that don't know you, where are you calling in from?
Hey, Andrew, I'm so excited to be here. This will be super fun. I love, doing this and obviously talking house hacking, so this is up my alley. I'm calling from the middle of nowhere, which is Middlebury, Indiana. So I live in the Midwest, the flyover states, but the kind of the sweet spot for finding those 1% rural houses. So that's where I'm coming from today.
Awesome. And I mean, I obviously know your house hack story, and you've got this really cool thing. Like, let's just start off high level summary, fill folks in on, your background, your story, and how you got into house hacking, because it's pretty, I want to say unusual, but it's probably not. And that's part of why I wanted to have you on. So go for it.
Yeah, it's a little windy, I feel like. So I feel like my personal finance story probably started in 2016. So got married and we got ourselves into like a heap of debt. So we were like $80,000-ish in debt, just like buying, like I had a brand new job with my college degree and I had a master's degree. And so I was like, oh, well, I deserve a nice car. Like, this is fantastic. And so you finance yourself some pretty new vehicles and you just end up with this giant mound of debt and you look like you're living like the American dream, but you're like, wait a minute, I have a lot of payments. This is terrible. And so I had a friend introduce me to Dave Ramsey. So I literally started in kind of this whole investing Instagram world as one of the crazy Dave Ramsey people, the real estate folks kind of hate, to be honest.
Yeah, you're one of those folks.
Yeah, I was one of those people. So I've obviously fallen off the bandwagon really hard on the Dave Ramsey, but it really got me kind of a solid foundation. So we paid off $118,000 in 2 years. And then about a year in, I read Set for Life by Scott Trench. So he's one of the Bigger Pockets guys. And that was kind of my introduction to, because I feel like the Bigger Pockets Money podcast is kind of like a Dave Ramsey, like a softer version. Yeah. But I was coming off of Dave Ramsey. And so Bigger Pockets honestly scared the crap out of me because I'm like, these people are like renovating houses on credit cards. What the heck is going on? And so that just seemed terrifying. So I found Scott Trench and read that Set for Life book, and it was just fantastic. And I was like, I'm ready to do real estate once this debt is cleared up. And so we bought, we had 5 properties within.
Oh, wow. So you went fast track on it.
We went fast. Yeah. So I somehow convinced my then husband to sell our big house on 5 acres and buy 2 small properties. And that's what got us going. Our first rental and then a live-in flip. And then we just kept buying from there and literally just saving up 20% down payments. And then my husband and I went through a really bad life experience. I don't know how much you want me to talk about it, but I am officially divorced, which is very exciting for people who have been following my whole journey. So he got into some, bad life choices with some things. And so me and my daughter kind of got out of a bad situation. And I kind of started house hacking out of necessity. Because I was like, oh my goodness, I am 31 years old living with mom and dad. This is not my life dream. Like, I have a really nice W-2 job, like a very fancy job where I like travel and do all these things. Like, living in their spare bedroom isn't my dream in life. Yeah. So, and then I was like, well, I had this husband forever that refused to house hack and kind of thought I was a little crazy, but I was like, my dream has been house hacking. Like, now's the perfect time to do that. And so I used a private money lender, which is a family member, to buy my very first house hack. So then me and my daughter would have a safe place to live and it wouldn't be at risk in the divorce and separation and everything we were going through, because our life was kind of chaotic and I just wanted like a safe, happy place to really rebuild life. And so started out house hacking and absolutely love it. And we've been house hacking since June. So
Awesome.
almost a year of house hacking in my home. So
So much good stuff in there I want to dig into. And like because I've been following your journey and like the whole mediation and like it's being
oh my
final, then settled, and like,
Yeah.
all right, so
It's kind of like a soap opera. But, like
I know I'm trying to think of like
contemplated writing a book.
it would be an interesting read. It would be a very interesting read.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, obviously you did what most people do, right? You get out of school, you feel like, hey, I can actually afford some stuff now. I'm going to go buy a car. I'm going to put some stuff on credit card. I mean, was this all him, all you, both of y'all making bad choices? I mean, how did you get to the place where of like it was bad financially?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say I was the person where I'm like, a brand new car is security.
Yeah.
I wanted, like, I financed myself. Well, I did slightly use, like, I did a 1 year old Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'm also a car person, so this was like real bad for me because I'm like, I want a Jeep Grand Cherokee. And then I convinced him to sell his like older truck because to me that was just unsafe and buy a brand new 2016 like Chevy Silverado. And we all know how much trucks cost nowadays.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of debt where like she gets an SUV and he gets a brand new truck. And so that was definitely me pushing that part. Um, about 5 months into our marriage, he got his first DUI. And so we had a lot of debt with that. And when he got his DUI, he totaled a truck. And then we had like I don't know, it was like a series of unfortunate events. Like truck was totaled, but then we like put a new transmission in it to try to fix it, and it was not possible. And so we just like kept racking up debt. And then we had all these lawyer bills with the
Yeah.
DUIs, and we weren't tracking our spending at all. So the lawyer bills hit, and we had all this outgoing expenses and all these new debts, and it was just like way too much all at one time. And so it just got really out of hand. And honestly, like a 3 month period, we were like 80K in. It was kind of a mess.
So a little bit of just, I don't want to necessarily say like bad choices because like buying a car, I mean, like if you're going to buy a car, buying a 1 year old car is better than buying like a brand new car.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to say completely bad choices, but not the best choices, maybe financially.
They
And
felt
then,
very normal.
yeah, very normal. So then
And
you
then
had
you thought you were being suffocated.
all of this stuff hit. I mean, did you have like an emergency savings account, or was that just, hey, we have a grand or two in the bank and we've got money on credit cards, so we feel okay? And then all the stuff hit, or did you not have any sort of cushion?
I've never been in the situation where you rack up like so many emergencies before, but also I'm coming off of college.
Yeah.
So for me, the sweet spot was I always kept like $6,000 in my bank account as a buffer at all times, and I usually kept an emergency fund. But the emergency fund went to pay like a lawyer's retainer and a transmission, and then I got really nervous because I was like, I don't know if like our incoming and our outgoing like match at all because we weren't really budgeting very well at the time.
Yeah.
And so I started not auto paying my credit cards. And that like was the kicker because then it got like out of hand. And then 4 months later, you're like, oh, you can't pay in full, but you don't really know how much you can pay. So then you just pay a little bit. And then pretty soon it was like 10K and then 12K. And it just kind of skyrocketed. And it's sad that I don't really know exactly what happened, but yeah, it just kind of spirals and it gets out of hand before you know it. It's very easy to get into debt. It feels very accidental.
Especially like when you have a couple serious things. I mean, obviously there weren't smart choices being made
Right.
to end up with a DUI, but still like wreck car, DUI. I
Right.
mean, even if you had a 15 grand reserve, it could be gone.
I remember
So
the
then,
lawyer's retainer was like over, I think, $3,000, which I mean,
yeah.
at the time it felt like a lot because you're newlyweds. And I'm like, what the heck is happening here?
And I mean, oh man, there's just a lot here.
I know.
So
Sorry.
no, this is good stuff. So, I mean,
Ask
and part of it is right. We learn from our failures, and that's how we get ahead a lot of the time. So, I mean, all this stuff happened. You weren't making necessarily horrible financial decisions, but then life hit and all these bad things happened. How long was it before you came across Dave Ramsey?
So the DUI was in May, I want to say. We got married in January. The DUI was like 4 or 5 months later, I think
Oh,
May.
wow.
And then he quit his high paying job, which we had planned on. But when everything hit the fan, like that wasn't a good choice anymore. Um, and then trying to think, oh, I've had a friend tell me about it because I was just like freaking out about the cost of a DUI and needing a new truck and just like stressed. And at first I was just really annoyed because Dave Ramsey doesn't come across as the best person to a lot of people. Like he kind of yells at people on the phone.
Yeah.
And so I was like, literally spent like months Googling like all the blogs that talked about how terrible Dave Ramsey was. And that's how I spent the first few months. And I like to call that the denial phase, where I was just like, Dave Ramsey has to be wrong. Like my very first blog idea for my own blog was, Dave Ramsey's crazy or Dave Ramsey. I can forget my witty title I had then. And then we were in so deep at that point, I didn't really know how to dig back out. And it just seemed like everything was just going out and not enough was coming in. And then we also learned that the business that he had joined with his family wasn't going to be sustainable through the winter months. It was a seasonal business, but we didn't know the income would drop off so fast. And so I just freaked out because I'm like, we can't cover our minimum payments on just my income. And so I was like, this is not okay. And so then I really drank the Kool-Aid and just buckled down because I'm like, there's no other way. Like he might be insane, this Dave Ramsey guy, but we're doing it. I don't even care. So, and then I started waitressing and I waitressed then. So I think about August, I have the sticky note from July 31st of 2016 where I wrote up all our debts and sat on the floor and cried because I just didn't want to know how bad it was.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, 8 months into the marriage, I was like crying on the floor, being like, there has to be a better way to live life than this. So,
Very rough start to the marriage.
yeah, a little stressful,
And then did you have to convince him? I mean, sort of like you had convinced him to get the new car. Now, did you have to turn around and be like, hey, we're going to do this Dave Ramsey thing?
Honestly, I did a lot of it by myself for the first year because I picked up a waitressing job and just said, like, I'm going to work on paying off my car first. Because I want less car loans and we're going to do this one first. And so just started paying off my waitressing to pay off my car. And so that took me a year. And then after year one, I wanted to stop waitressing because I'm like, this is terrible. Like I work a W-2 day job at a hospital and then I waitress 3 to 5 nights a week. I'm dying. And so
Yeah.
I stopped waitressing and then I kind of had to get him on board with stuff because I don't like going slow and doing things. Like I wanted to get it done in 2 years because I just didn't want to drag it out. And so I really needed him on board at that point. So we did like a smart money event and Dave Ramsey conferences and like all the things to kind of like, he wasn't not on board, but I wouldn't say he was like ever like super, like he didn't want to do budget meetings with me when they talk about like budget date nights. Like that was his idea of hell.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's
So
like, no, thank you, please don't micromanage me.
yeah. So you drove the conversation, and did it take you 2 years to pay off all the debt?
Yeah, we were 1 month shy of 2 years, so 30 or 23 months. Yeah.
I mean, a rough 8 months and then 2 years of turning around like the financial situation. And then what made you want to go into real estate? I mean, I know you'd mentioned the set for life, but I mean, everyone in the Dave Ramsey community, and he always preaches, you don't buy real estate until you can buy all cash, which
Right.
I think is crazy, but nevertheless, I mean, how long did that come around from like when you started reading Set for Life and decide to like another big shift of like, okay, great, debt's paid off. Now we're going to go back into debt.
Well, we got to the point where we were chunking so much money every month. So he went back to his high paying job once I kind of like was like, hey, bro, we're gonna do this. Like he went back to the high paying job and said, like, I get you, like this is a lot better. Like we want to be debt free. Like he really got on board after we did that smart money event together. He wasn't gonna budget and micromanage and do all of that, but he was like, I will get my income back up. And so he took the high paying job back and we just started chunking like thousands of dollars a month at debt. And I'm like, okay, but once we pay off debt, like what do we do next? And he always had hated his job and just like hated working there. And so I'm like, it would be nice to not have to chase high income jobs to build a life where you're not dependent on like staying at a job you hate just because you need that income.
Yeah.
And so we kind of started to talk about that. And he was always really interested in real estate. So then I just started reading books and started out with like the pivotal, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I think that really just like sealed it for me. And then I found like Set for Life and Scott Trench and really got into like designing your life in a certain way and really the financial independence aspects of things. And that really got the real estate game going. Because I kind of figured out how to do index funds and all of that, and it seemed easy. And I was like, I wanted to become financially independent because this guy like hates his job. Like he doesn't want to be at this anymore. And so financial independence by saving in index funds just sounded boring. And so we wanted something more tangible, and real estate was the answer to that equation. So.
And I mean, obviously you knew about house hacking from the book, and did you try to bring that up at that point in time? And he just said, no, we're definitely not going to do that.
So we both agreed to sell our house, the 5-acre house that we had done. That was our very first live-in flip. And so we remodeled that house, and the goal was always to sell it at some point. We thought we'd graduate to a bigger property and lifestyle creep. And I was like, if we're going to be serious about doing real estate, we're going to need to go all in at some point, and we're going to need to sell this house and take the money, and that will give us 2 down payments. And so we, finished this giant rehab together and then bought these 2 properties. And so I tried really hard to get the primary residence we lived in to be a house hack. But he was like, absolutely not. We have dogs. We want to have kids. Like, we're not going to like share a yard with a family. And he, no matter what way you house hack, he was not interested in hearing that. But the live-in flip he would do. So
awesome.
That was next.
So that live-in flip, I mean, what'd you end up buying it for originally?
The first one?
Yeah.
So we bought that house. Oh gosh, I have that spreadsheet somewhere. I should pull that up. We bought that house for, I want to say 200,000, maybe like 180.
Okay. And then do you remember roughly how much you had to do in work? 20 grand, 40 grand, 80 grand?
Probably like 15 or 20.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere in there. It was wallpaper, every room, and dolphin murals. The dolphin mural. So I'm 5'3", and the dolphins were taller than me. On all 4 walls in the bathroom. I'm like, bless them. They must have like loved Florida, but no, thank you.
Did you have to do anything like major, like roof, electrical, kitchen, bathroom, or is it purely just cosmetic? Like, hey, this is a nice piece of land.
We took out like the bathrooms were the big remodels. We didn't touch the kitchen. We just painted the living rooms, and everything pretty much stayed the same. So it was a lot of paint. They had pink carpet. So we pulled all the carpet and put down engineered hardwoods because the area it was in kind of demanded a higher level of flooring, and LVP wasn't quite the cool thing yet. But then the bathrooms were the big thing. So we added a full bathroom out of what used to be a really awkward laundry room closet half bath. So that was like our big remodel, was that bathroom.
And then what'd you end up selling that for?
$235.
Okay. So you walked away with a little bit of cash, and then...
And we had put that house on a shorter term mortgage, and so we ended up walking away with, I think, $53,000.
And you used that to buy a rental and a live-in flip?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And then did you essentially use that for the down payment on the 2 other places?
Yep. Yeah. So we literally just split that money in half. The live-in flip was $119,000, so a lot cheaper homes. And we put 10% down on that. And then the rental we bought was a little 2-bedroom, and it was $87,000. And we did 20% down on that guy.
And then you also have another rental or two in here that you did with your husband, correct?
Yes. We bought a duplex after that, and then we bought another single family home. And those were just super saving. By then we were out of debt. We didn't have that. We were doing a live and flip at the time, and we were just super saving our way to 20% down payments as fast as we could.
I mean, this sort of sounds like a cool story. I mean, like,
Yeah.
hey, we made
It's going really well so far, right?
I know it's you made bad financial mistakes. You turned that around. You're still working the high income jobs. You're chunking away tons of money. You're using it into real estate. You're buying her house
And we
that
were
needs
like
work.
flipping together. Like we rehabbed 4 houses together. So
So you end up here with 5 properties.
oh, we also own a piece of land. That's the 5th.
Okay, the piece of land. And then
He bought a hunting property, so he's a really big hunter, and that was always his dream. And so I said, if you will do this live-in flip with me and buy these tiny houses and live at this little property in town on this like postage stamp, we're gonna buy you some hunting property in the next year or two. So it just took us a while to find it, and I picked it up off of Facebook Marketplace, which was pretty sweet. So
Facebook Marketplace has some good deals. I mean, and to me that sounds like a fair exchange, right? It's
I
like,
know it was
hey,
22 acres. It was great. Yeah.
we do this living compromise and we can get this other thing. It's like, what
I
at the
couldn't quite
time, what do we value?
But the live-in flip, he's like, okay, hunting property, we got this. Because he didn't want to live where he hunted also. He always wanted that property to be separate. And so it made sense at the time where I'm like, if you live on the postage stamp for me, we'll get hunting property for you. So that's
Awesome.
The
all right, so where did it start to go wrong?
In the last house that we renovated together. So we bought the duplex, and right at the same time he got a second DUI. And so, but ironically, that's not where it went wrong. So I bought that duplex with him never walking in it because he was on house arrest. Oh, my life sounds really classy right now. But anyway, so we bought that and it was fine-ish. And then we had a full year that was really great, really quiet, like got all of that done and things were really good. And we bought our last property also off of Facebook Marketplace. That was our first not MLS deal, was that final single family home. And so we started renovating that single family home at the end of 2019 together. So we picked up all of these houses super fast. And so at the end of 2019, I started to know things were going badly because the renovations got weird. So he would eventually end up having a drug problem, and I'm not handy. Like, I learned how to renovate houses with him. Like, he taught me everything I know. When I'm like using a screw gun and some drills and like repairing drywall, like he's taught me those skills. Because I grew up in a family that we hired out everything. Like, my dad like hired a light bulb out and my mom was embarrassed. Like, he didn't want to change the fluorescent bulbs in our laundry room. And so I grew up in that situation. And so I knew nothing. And so like the renovation, like we got this house and the very first thing he did was like lay the vinyl plank floors. And I'm like, we have to paint. We have drywall work to do. And if you've ever renovated a house ever in your life, you know the floors go last because all your paint's going to fall on them. All your drywall mud's going to stick on them. And it was just a royal pain to like finish that rehab. And I'm like, the reason I know the floors go last is because you taught me the floors go last. Like, what? And it was just like weird things like that started happening, where you're like, hey, you're really smart. Why are we doing like just odd, really weird things? And at that point we had just had our daughter, which was like a totally like planned pregnancy. Like we're 30, like this is always what we talked about. Like we're in a really good spot financially with all these properties. Like we're kind of crushing it. So we were super excited. And so I don't know what happened, but like very shortly after her, we started rehabbing that last house and he just like got really weird. And then I haven't told this full story, but the reason I found out was he was acting really, really weird. And I put a camera up in the house because he was like acting really odd. And I caught him weighing out drugs in my living room. And that's how I found out there was a problem. Yeah. So
that's rough.
Yeah. So that was like, she was 3.5 months old, and I was just like, you could have knocked me down because I just like never saw that coming. Like, I guess there was always a history of like the DUIs and stuff, and like probably some like authority respect problems happening there with that whole piece, but not to the degree that it ended up being. I never expected all of that. So,
And I mean, did you sort of take off at that point to go back to, mom and dad's place, or did y'all like try to work through some stuff, or was that?
so you're in love and you have a 3-month-old baby, and I was 1 week away from going back to my full-time job, and I literally told no one, and he was like, this isn't mine. Like, I was just trying to help my brother. I know it's really stupid, but I won't ever do it again. And I believed him, which sounds ridiculous, like going back in time. But at the time, you're just like, you don't know what to do. And there was a lot of like mind games and like manipulation happening, which I totally talk about if anyone's like in a relationship where they're, if you Google gaslighting, that was like a big thing then, where he was like it was my fault that everything happened because what kind of crazy person nanny cams their husband? And I'm like, don't be crazy, and I won't put a camera in the living room.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm like, yeah, it is kind of crazy. Like, I shouldn't have to do this, but also I shouldn't worry. I shouldn't, like, you 100% validated all of my concerns by doing these behaviors. So, like, this is why we're here, not because I'm anxious. Like, I 100% confirmed all my suspicions when I couldn't get a straight answer from him. So.
And I mean, was he still working the job, and y'all, I mean, how were the rental properties going? Were there
so the last
rent collection
rehab was the
issues,
hardest
or?
rehab ever to finish. So, I mean, all the other rental properties had tenants in them. I've always done the tenant placement, the screening. I do like all the legwork. Like, he was my like contractor handyman. He was never interested in managing tenants, screening tenants, like answering emails, payments, auto payments. Like, I'm a nerd about like the spreadsheets and logistics. So really at that point, I handled everything. I'm like, I just need you to finish this house before I lose my mind. And so it was a really rough 3 months trying to get it done, because he, like, I would go bring him like pizza for dinner, because obviously like our marriage is not awesome right now with all of this weird stuff going on. And so I'd like go up to surprise him, and he like wouldn't be there. And he'd be like, oh, I left to go run some errands, but then it like kept happening, and he just wasn't ever where he said he was going to be. And then it just got really out of hand. But I didn't actually get out. Like, I tried to save it for a long time. So she was 3.5 months old when that happened, and we moved out, and that was September, and I moved out in April. So just like I feel like the harder I fought, the worse it got, to be honest. Like, he was just kind of done at that point. And the more I was like, please stop doing this to our family, he was like, YOLO. So it went the opposite way.
Yeah, you can't help people that aren't ready to change.
No.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted him to be somebody like he was living life like he's kind of always lived life. And, that just wasn't going to work for me. But like, what I wanted from him wasn't something he was going to do either. And so I think in the end, that's kind of like where it ended up, where I'm like, I'm trying to squeeze you in this tiny box of what I would like out of life, and you have no interest in being in anywhere near this box of like stable, happy, enjoyable, calm future. Like, you just like the idea of you like the excitement and things that you're going for in life, and I just didn't want that lifestyle. And with a baby, that like changed everything. And I don't know if it was maternity leave and me being home and me like knowing everything and knowing like where he was coming and going, because we were very independent people. So I think I probably was able to overlook a lot that I didn't even know about, because I also didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
So
you took off, sounds like a very smart decision. Go back to mom and dad's. I mean, were you still managing the rental properties while you started the whole separation and divorce process?
So I moved out April 3rd of 2020, right when COVID was starting to happen. Moved in with my parents. It was a really quick move out. Like I didn't plan on moving. Like I mean, I wanted to move out, but I like you just hit the point where you're like the day came and I knew I was done.
Yeah.
And so I called my mom and I'm like, I have to get out and I have to get out fast. Like this is not good here. And so I moved out like all of my daughter's things were like I just want her room to like look like her room still. And so we moved like all of her stuff and then I just threw my own crap in like trash bags and like I'll figure it out. But I just want her life to be somewhat normal because holy smokes, this is terrible. And so we moved in with them for 3 months while we figured out what we're gonna do next. I also assumed at this point that like me leaving and his daughter leaving would somehow like be a wake up call. But he didn't talk to us for 2 weeks.
So, I mean, did you talk to a lawyer at this point?
Yeah.
Or did you sort of realize like I could go buy a property and it not potentially him fight for it or have issues? Or did you get any sort of legal advice during this early period?
So I needed legal advice. That's a good question because I think like it's important to know logistically in case anyone has to do that. So I moved out. So it got really crazy in the month of March and he just started spending money, like an astronomical amount of money. Like in 6 weeks, he spent over $11,000. And so when I started moving, like I was telling him, like, I'm going to turn off your cards. Like you have to stop pulling out money. Like he would just go to ATMs and like max out how much he could pull out in a day. And I had no idea what was going on. And so I'm like, I will turn off your stuff. Like we're not going to have anything left. And like so I turned off like his personal card and then he just started spending out of the business. And so I moved all the money into an account and just sat on it because I'm like, this guy has lost his mind. And so I called a lawyer right away. I called 3 different ones to get their opinion because I'm like, I don't even know if I can take this money and sit on it. I don't know what to do. And like, if he like loses his mind more or wherever he's at right now, like, I don't know where he's at with life at the moment and I don't understand what's going on. So I'm like, I just need to protect myself from him because I don't like, this is crazy. And so I filed for legal separation to protect myself financially. So I pulled the money out, sat it in an account, filed for separation, hoping that'd be a wake up call for him to be like, oh, I've spent a lot of money lately.
Yeah.
But that never happened.
So did the sort of a logistical question here, once you filed for the separation, did the lawyer say, hey, pull that money, but realize you're probably going to have to give half of it back, but pull it that way, at least it just doesn't disappear with him on a bender?
I had already pulled most of it. And then I talked to lawyers and they're like, he's like, you want to try to protect what you can of the business assets. And I'm like, I pretty much moved everything by then. But by then there was like, at one point we had about $40,000 and we're down to like 26 by the end of things. And so I just pulled what was left and then sat on it. And he's like, file for legal separation, but I just moved it into my bank account. And I'm like, we'll split it up later. But I'm like, at this point, like he could care less about the rental properties. So I'm going to be like, if there's any repairs or anything, I'm gonna be the one having to pay for them anyway. So I want to make sure like he can't spend that. So
and did you change?
Essentially the lawyer said like, good for you for protecting yourself and like we'll settle this in the end with him. Yeah.
So they basically said, realize you'll have to give some of it back, but
right.
Smart move pulling
It's
out.
like, you live in Indiana, it's a 50-50 state. We're gonna have to split it, but we're just gonna see like, he's like, there's so many assets like in play here that it just depends. Like in the end, like in theory you go halves, but you might say like you keep all the money and he gets a property or something like that. Like it's kind of whatever he wants to at the end and how things go. So
what were you using for property management? Cozy, Avail, just picking up checks?
Half and half Cozy and Avail, and then I've slowly kind of switched all over to Avail. So I'm obsessed with them because electronic leasing is my favorite. And I don't have to like DocuSign or anything like that. So did you go into your Avail and Cozy account and say, hey, don't deposit this in that normal account anymore. Let's go in and change where the rent gets deposited as well? Yeah. Like I moved because otherwise it was gone. Like one, I think tenant, like it was right at the beginning of the month because when I moved, like started moving things and like rents take a while to deposit in Cozy. And so I
Yeah.
remember a rent got deposited and he was like pulling money out of ATMs and I'm like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
stop.
Before you could even
And
grab
I'm
it.
like,
Yeah.
if this guy spends their security deposits, I'm gonna lose my mind. So pretty much I transferred everything. So I just made like I have one bank account. I use Ally. So I just made one called like business security deposits and just popped everything over and then made an account for each property and automatically transferred the money into like this business account. So
Okay.
yeah, I
And
pretty
then,
much changed all of my like I like today I have nothing that I had when I was married. Like I don't have the same cell phone plan, TV, like I don't have bank accounts. Like everything I had to get everything brand new because
yeah.
everything was impacted by the end.
Yeah. So you decided to house hack as like, I know you had said you've been wanting to do one for a while. Did
Yeah.
you look at this as, I mean, what was your mindset of like, why do a house hack and not go buy a single family home for you and your daughter? Like, why go the house hacking
I
route?
wanted to live for free. Because I mean, so we have this hunting property. We have three rental properties. One was demoed at the time, which we hadn't quite gotten into, honestly. So we had the house, this final single family home got finished and got a tenant in it. And then we started rehabbing actually this duplex. And then obviously that was a terrible idea. Like I don't know what I was thinking back in like January to think that we could do another remodel together, but he got a little bit better for a minute before it got really, really bad. Um, and so we totally had no tenants in our duplex. And so it's just sitting there costing money every month. And so, and at this point, we had talked a little bit and he told me he didn't feel like making any of the mortgage payments.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I paid for his house, the hunting land, and was responsible for all the rentals. And so I'm like, I've always wanted a house hack, but it was more a necessity thing, to be honest, where I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to live for free. Someday I'll be very glad I did this like financial independence step. But right now, if I have to continue paying his two mortgages for a hunting property in his home that he's living in for the next, like, I don't know, year, which is the average divorce time, I need to cut my expenses, but I don't want to live with my mom and dad, even though they're wonderful humans, for the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what was your criteria for a house hack? It's, you knew it was a smart decision financially, but also it was out of necessity. So you could make sure those mortgages didn't go in default and ruin your credit in the process. So, I mean, what was the criteria for the house hack?
So I actually think this is interesting. So about a month, I don't even know, like months before, somewhere in all of the shenanigans, I was in Nashville for a work trip. So I used to travel for work. And so I was in Nashville and I met up with Felipe Mejia. So he did the Real Estate Rookie podcast with Bigger Pockets, and a lot of people follow him on Instagram. But I think all of his rental properties now are single family homes with a walkout basement that he's converted into a duplex. And
Yeah.
I was just like fascinated by this idea because there is a very expensive town where we live that I've always wanted to be in. And it's like a few towns over from where our live and flip was. And there's a high cost of entry in this neighborhood. And people were like, you can't buy any rental properties there. And I'm like, not if you're looking at them for multifamily, not if you're shopping the MLS for multifamily. You're probably not going to find anything. But if I'm shopping for a single family home with a walkout basement, this
Yeah.
gives me some options. And so I looked at three different properties, almost four, but that one, it sold super fast to a cash buyer. So there was one property that was a single family home, a ranch, and it had a mother-in-law suite on the other side of its attached garage. But then I looked at two properties with walkout basements to convert. And then the third one I looked at was the winner. So yeah,
Awesome.
just shopping like a decent parcel of land in a desirable school district. There's two school districts I was interested in. And I told my realtor, I'm like, I only want to look at houses with a walkout basement that has at least two options for egress windows. So it can at least be a 2-bedroom. And
Awesome.
that's
So
how I
explain the egress windows for folks that don't understand that.
Yeah, so essentially you need I needed 3 large holes in the basement that people can escape through, I guess is in rough terms. So it has to be, there's very specific measurements in your building code. Like you can Google like Indiana, what's the size of a egress window need to be? Because I don't know anything. So that's literally what I did. I was like, how big does an egress window need to be? And it needs to be at least 22 inches wide, and it needs to be a certain height from the floor. And so if you have like little skinny windows at the top in your basement, those aren't going to work. It needs to be where people are able to escape out in the case of a fire or an emergency. And so in order to call a bedroom in a basement, you need to have 2 forms of escape, a doorway and a window. So you need to have like 2 holes, I guess, to get out of in this house, and they need to be a certain depth from the floor. So people can get out.
Yeah, you can't have that window in the ceiling because you might not be able to crawl out of the ceiling. And one other key point I'll add in here, it's for spaces that you're going to sleep in. So like a laundry room in a basement doesn't need to have 2 forms of egress, or the living room doesn't, but the sleeping areas do. Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, really cool way of like, hey, we want to be in this town with the school district. Realtor, I have to have a walkout basement, and we've got to have, be able to make it a 2-bedroom, and we need these forms of egress. So like, what was the realtor's response? Did they work with real estate investors, or were they sort of like random weird requests, but okay?
My realtor is a rock star. She has sold me every house but one so far. And
so she knew you did things a little differently
by now. And she's every time I learn something new with you, Sarah. You're welcome, Heather. So yeah, she's pretty fantastic. So it's always an adventure for us. So she was like, okay, let's do it. It's interesting though, because we've walked so many properties together at this point that we walked up to this house, and she's like standing on the front porch, and she looks at my mom, and she's like, this is going to be the one. Like, just letting you know, she's going to need to figure out how to buy this house.
All right. So was the basement unfinished, or was it finished, or like partially finished, just not like its own income suite at this point?
It was finished-ish.
Okay.
So if you weren't going to make it a rental unit, it was finished. But there's lots of rules and regulations. So as part of like the due diligence period, when I bought this house, I called the building department and I said like, hey, I have this house under contract. We're in the inspection phase of life. And so I need to know what I need to do with it. And so they required fireproofing between units. And so that required, so it had a drop ceiling with like the tiles that we all hate. And so that had to be pulled down, and you had to fireproof somehow between the 2 floors. And so that meant 5/8 drywall. So essentially we had to pull down the entire ceiling and drywall it. So it ended up being a pretty big, so we had to pull down the entire drop ceiling in every room and drywall. And then and then I added a bedroom. So those were like the big things. And it was just very, very, very dated. The kitchen was fantastic. I didn't need to do anything to the kitchen except for paint the walls.
So there's already a kitchen down there too.
Yeah, there's already a kitchen, which is fantastic.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And then
kitchen, a bathroom, and a laundry room.
Okay, so you made it into a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom. And then what was the upstairs like?
Awesome. It's a ranch style home, a 3-bed, 1-bath, and it was literally turnkey upstairs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what'd you end up buying the property for?
We bought it for $280.
One thing I really want to call out, I mean, because I get a lot of messages from folks that will DM us and like, I can't find a multifamily. I can't find a multifamily. And my response is like, get creative. Look for that
Stop looking
unfinished basement. Yeah, look for the, garage, detached garage.
That was originally what I set out for. And then I'm like, I couldn't, like, you're really limited on that. So I'm like, okay, started calling it the Felipe Mejia special. Like, I'm just going for the Felipe special. That's what I'm searching. I just need walkout basements. There's nothing, like, I didn't want to build up a garage. Like, I wanted to find one that already had the upstairs because I didn't have a lot of cash at this point. Like, I was trying to hold on to everything in case I had furnaces go out or something because life was a little crazy at the time.
Yes, it was a little crazy at the time. I mean, this is awesome though. Like, super creative. You bought it for $280. So how'd you finance it? Were you able to do an FHA loan? I mean, what'd you do for a down payment?
Private money lender.
Awesome.
So Also out of
And that,
necessity. So at this point I had filed, so I guess legally speaking, I had filed for legal separation already by the time I was shopping for houses. And so my lawyer said I could have done traditional financing. Like I could have done a conventional loan or I could have done something like that if I wanted to. But I was just absolutely terrified of the instability and the madness happening in life that I wanted to make sure my house was fine and I didn't ever want to
yeah,
have the conversation of, can I have that? So I didn't want it in my name.
yep.
And so that was just kind of a personal choice, but I'm like, I've never used a private money lender, so let's like shop around and see how that goes. And then I think I would have tried conventional financing as I if I could, but I was able to find a really good solution for that.
H- How'd you find the private money lender?
So actually, I talked to a real estate investor online and was talking to him, and his interest rates were pretty high. And so I was like, I'm going to do it because I don't live with my parents and this house is fantastic. And so essentially, I like had this whole like we talked interest rates, we talked everything, and then I took those numbers and I went to a couple family members and said, "Hey, you've seen me invest in real estate. You know me. You know I'm type A. You know I have a good job. You know life's a little crazy right now. This is why I want to finance it this way. Here's the rates he's giving. What do you think?" And both of them were like, "Oh my gosh, these rates are so high." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Do you want to help me with that?"
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, like you ask someone for money, they give you advice. You ask them for advice, then they give you money.
I've heard that saying, but never thought about it as matching the situation. But I was like, we're gonna do a business meeting because I don't want this to be a favor. Like
Yeah.
I am a real estate investor. This is what I do. This is like hopefully gonna be my job someday. So I came with like, here's my budget. Here is our tax returns. Like here is my W-2. Like I came with a whole packet, like an investor packet for them because I'm like, this is important to me. And they're like, calm down. We know you like spreadsheets. Let's just talk about it. They're like, we're least worried about that part. Like, here's all these papers. Thank you. Which was weird because I'm like, wait, I spent hours on these spreadsheets. You don't want to see them. They're
That
like,
happened. I've been in those same
I'm like, I
meetings where you're
think
like, we got
because I
everything. And they're
brought
like, no, no, no.
everything that they weren't worried because I'm like, I could spend like 2 hours talking over these. And it was kind of interesting that way. But again, I think if I rolled in with nothing, it probably would have been a little different.
I mean, well, that's the way it is when you're not prepared and you don't have it, then you get called out on it. And when you're well prepared,
Yeah.
but
You end up
okay.
talking about like what's for dinner. That's not
And
what I'm here
sometimes
today.
people are like that, right? You know, they're like, cool, 90% of the conversation is talking about life, and then the last 10% is the business and the numbers. So
Yeah.
what'd you have to do for a down payment, if any? What was the rate? What'd you end
No
up
down
having for your
payment,
payment?
interest only loan we just did it a year at a 4% interest rate.
Phew, pretty good deal.
Yeah. A
So
little better
what
than the
was your
10% I had
yes?
gotten.
What was the payment and then taxes and insurance roughly per month?
They ended up covering taxes and insurance because my legal fees skyrocketed shortly after this.
Hmm.
And so they just like ran me a tab on the side for taxes and insurance that I paid off at the end. But I just paid, I think it was $850 a month until I placed a tenant. And then after the tenant was placed, the rent was $1,300 and I direct deposited that rent to them to pay down my tab of the insurance and everything. So I was like
That's awesome.
overpay. So I went to like paying the basics to like overpaying them in the end. And so by the time, so I actually have refinanced the house. So I own my own home now. Um, and so I refinanced out of it in March, so a month ago, a little less.
And then what'd you refi into?
So I refinanced in a 30-year conventional mortgage at a 2.6% interest rate, which I'm super jazzed about.
Woo. And what's your payment all in principal, interest, taxes, and insurance?
1,385.
And you still bringing in $1,300 in rent?
Yes. So I picked tenants on a 6-month lease because I couldn't decide if I wanted to Airbnb this property because it's in a tourist area or if I wanted to do a long-term tenant. And then I realized my life is a little crazy. The last thing I need is a job like an Airbnb. So,
Yeah.
but now my tenants are moving out in May. So I'm in the process of screening tenants right now. And so I'm doing 4 showings tomorrow at $1,400 rent.
So,
So,
I mean, you're essentially going to be living for free then.
yeah. So I will be officially making like $48 starting mid-May.
And I mean, obviously, like you'll have some maintenance and some capex and come up, like,
Right.
but I mean, you achieved what you wanted, like got out of
Yeah.
the bad relationship, the divorce is finalized, you found a home in an area with good schools for you and your daughter,
Yeah. Every
and
every
now,
nice sunny day in Indiana, we go to the park next door and walk it. Like it's
oh,
fast. Like I like we have like a sidewalk that it's beautiful. Like I'm obsessed with this house. It's fantastic. It's exactly what we needed. So
that's awesome.
yeah, very
All right,
very happy.
so, I- and I'll keep this sort of in the realm of real estate.
Yeah.
What was your biggest real estate mistake you've made that, like, if you could go back and smack yourself and say, like, hey, you're about to do this, don't do it, like what would you do differently, or now that you've got several years of experience where you'd say, hey, don't do that, that's not the best move?
I guess we're about so I don't believe in like mistakes. Like I really don't. Like I mean, despite how insane this year has been, I wouldn't trade it for anything because I'm a very strong person now, and I feel like I was a really bad like people pleaser prior to all of this nonsense. And you get to a point where you're like, people are gonna say negative things about me, and I don't really care. And so it's been a really amazing personal growth year, but I've had a lot of therapy and life coaching to get to this place. So I'm like, every house teaches you something. And so I'm like, I mean, the duplex, for example, like I didn't know you couldn't transfer the sewer bill out of your name, like the sewer and water, and it is $75 a month. And that's a really big fee when your goal, when you're in the scaling up phase, is like $200 a door. You've now
Yeah.
cut that in half. And
Yeah.
so, little things like that, where just in the due diligence period, when you're at the process of buying the home, making sure if there's tenants getting their leases, making sure you've looked at every single utility bill, you've asked for copies, not just like what they feel like the electric bill costs every month,
Yeah.
and making sure that you can transfer all of them to the tenant name, because if you can't, you need to build that into your assessment of the property, which sounds really basic, but it's like every property I feel like I'm surprised by something. Like the last house, the last single family home we bought, I was like, I did it. Like I know I'm gonna have to pay for the water bill. The number's built in. We did rent a little higher. Like I'm good. And then like a month after we bought it, I get this call being like, we have to inspect your property every year and you have to pay it's $35 a year. There's a $35 a year charge, but I'm like, I literally thought I had everything. It was more like an ego thing than like obviously
Yeah.
$35 is not a deal breaker per year, but I was like, come on. I was so close to nailing everything in my due diligence period and talked to like housing and zoning and all the people, and you think you cross your I's and dot your T's on purchase number 5, but every house you learn something.
Real estate is a learning process, man. I've been in real estate investing 18 years now, and I still learn things, or things that I know, then laws changed or zoning
Yeah.
changed and it's not applicable anymore. Like you never stop learning in real estate.
Yeah. And I think that's like people are so worried about making mistakes. I'm like, no, you just have to be like, I'm gonna mess up a bunch, but it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And I guess the benefit or the downside, I guess, right now with life is I actually get to start totally over. So not only have I like personally I've redone everything. Like nothing is the same as it was a year ago. And then in the final stages of this divorce, we are selling all 5 properties and splitting the proceeds of that. And then I'm subtracting the fact that I've been paying every mortgage since April of last.
You're adding in a little property management fee is what you're saying.
Oh no, actually, because I'm like, there's like, I just want all the expenditures that I've
It's
had.
just back.
So just like getting that off the top. So we're actually selling and liquidating all the properties, which I didn't want to do at first, but now it's just like this is the easiest route to go. And so
Clean break, liquidate them, move on, make your own
I'm like,
investments.
I don't
Yeah.
want to argue about properties. Like I'm just not like, I'm like, you don't know the tenants' names, but you want there to manage it. Like I don't. I don't imagine this going well for them. And so selling everything just seemed like the best case scenario for everybody. So,
And looking back over these 5 years, what was the best real estate investment decision that you made?
probably that last house, honestly. I guess so my house hack by far is the best deal I've ever done. Like, I walked away from closing with a check and it was like the best day of my life. It was $2,000 and I was so excited. So I
Yeah.
was like, this really happens. Like, people get a check. Um, but so that is like a real thing. So that probably my house hack has been the best, like, really strategy deal where I had a plan and executed it, and I had to be like my own hype person because everyone's sitting around me being like, what are we doing? We're like buying a house hack, a single family home to make it into a house hack, and we're using private money, and then you're refining and you're paying for this renovation. And I'm like, it's fine. We're all doing fine.
Yeah.
So that's probably the
And
most
by the way, there's
exciting
this
deal.
global pandemic that happened during the whole past year as well. Like
Literally.
if everything you went through wasn't difficult enough, let's do it during, a global
And I
pandemic.
feel
So like,
extremely guilty that the fact that the pandemic was timing wise for my life totally going up in flames, because I didn't have to also travel for work, and being every single day for my daughter was so important. And so honestly, it was good timing for me, but I don't
little
think
silver
anyone says
lining,
that
right?
nowadays. So like, don't throw things at me, everyone of online who listens to this podcast, for saying it was favorable, because I mean, there's people that have been really negatively impacted. But I'm really
Yeah.
fortunate. My family has been really healthy, and I don't think we've had COVID yet. I've been tested a few times, but so far we've been really fortunate. And my parents have both gotten vaccinated now, so you know. But it's a little crazy doing all of this with the background of a pandemic. These people are like, oh yeah, life is nuts, and I'm like, you have no idea.
I can one up you if you want.
I don't know
Oh
where I live
man.
right now. How about you? No, but you're like, pain is not a competition, so you just go, okay, great. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It
Yeah.
is real hard, right? Because it is. It is hard for everybody because, yeah, you live each
I was
day.
about to say, like,
Yeah.
you made it through this past year. Like, at this point, I don't know what could be thrown at you. We're just like, "Psh,
I
whatever. This
don't
is
think
easy.
any, like,
Yeah.
so at our final day of meeting, I don't know if you caught this on my stories or not, but I just talked about this.
Mm.
Where I'm like, a final day of mediation, he walks in and he wants to renegotiate all the property again. And we just
Why? What happened to property number one?
and so he's like, okay, fine, we can sell everything, but I'm gonna need a few months to get property number one ready. I'm like, and I don't even have to say anything at this point because my lawyer is just so annoyed with the whole scenario. Because it's been a struggle, and so he's like, why? Why do you need a few months? Like, you guys fully rehab this? Like, it looked at like Chip and Joanna Gaines like colors before I left, and he's like, oh, because there was a house fire.
Ugh.
And at this point, like, Griffith, like, this is the least surprising thing that's happened this year. And I'm
Yeah.
like, of course there'd be, of like, are you okay? But okay, like, great, like, of course you had a house fire, and you're like, how? But it's not even a surprise anymore. So you're just like, okay, we'll figure it out. There's
And
real estate's a giant game of problem solving. That's what I figured out. Like, you're just like, all right, we're gonna move forward. We're gonna figure this out. But like, we're selling your house, my friend, because I'm not gonna be tied to you anymore. So
I love it. God. Yeah.
yeah, the
It's
thought of
just
house fire, I
so.
was like, oh my goodness. Like, I painted all those cabinets. That was my first like really good stab at painting cabinets, which I now do all the time. So I think I've painted like
Oh
five sets
man.
of cabinets, and every time I say never again. So
I tried it once and I said never again, and I've stuck to
yeah,
it. So not
the
not
last
not my
set, so
thing.
I did the last set I did for a friend, and I was like, don't tell anyone I helped you with these. I'm not doing it
I don't
anymore.
want people asking me. Yeah.
You're the last one. You're welcome.
So do you use a sprayer or do you actually paint and roll?
So the first 4 rounds, I think, of cabinets I've done, I've rolled and brushed them with a self-leveling paint. And then this last time I sprayed them because I have this really fancy sprayer, but I didn't like spraying them, but I think it's because I'm comfortable with the rolling and brushing and I know my
Yeah.
technique now, that the sprayer just got a little thick, and then I had like
Mm.
drips that I had to sand off, and that was annoying because I have never had to sand ones that I've rolled. So
Yeah, it takes a little while to get used to the sprayer. Then once you have it down, oh my God, it saves you so much time.
it was
I'm curious,
definitely
what type of paint sprayer did you get?
Oh, I was like so I have like the Greco like cordless
Yeah.
wireless paints, like the
Hmm.
little handheld like hook my DeWalt battery onto it and spray. Like it's pricey on Amazon, but it was fantastic. Like it does great. I used it to paint my basement ceiling. So
Yeah. Yeah.
because that was
Those are
my only
awesome.
regret when I like moved out all my stuff and then like a single move, I left the like we had the like really big like Greco paint sprayer and I yeah.
That's what I used to have, one of those
Which like
full
I'm still
commercial
mourning
ones.
about, but like, it'll be fine. I'll buy myself this little guy and it'll be fun because it just seemed better for like the little projects I tend to do to have the smaller one. So
Yeah. Man, we covered so much. God, I think we should just end there, and
that's
we
fine.
end with asking all of our guests a set of final 6
Sounds
questions.
good.
You ready for them?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right. Question number 1: what is your favorite personal finance resource? So, blog, book, podcast in the personal finance realm.
So personal finance book is my favorite book of all time. It's called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L.
Ooh,
Collins. And this is like the book. Like you read it, you learn how to do index funds, you know how to do your 401ks, your IRAs, like you know how to do all of the letters that people are confused by. You just like drink the index fund Kool-Aid and you set it and forget it. And it's like the best, like life-changing book I've ever read. And he has an amazing sense of humor and it's just an absolutely fantastic book. And the cover looks really boring. Are you familiar with this book at all?
oh,
Okay.
I've read
So
it. Yeah.
the cover looks horrible. Like I recommend it to people and I'm like, it looks boring. It looks like you will go to sleep, but read this, it'll change your life. So if you can get past that, it's fantastic.
So, funny note, I actually have a note with my will and stuff. So, my wife, she's not bad with finances, but she leaves it to me.
Yeah.
So, in my will and everything is literally, if I die, go buy a copy of this book, and you can go hire a financial advisor if you want, but they need to follow his path. Otherwise, you can do it on your own. Just read his book,
Yep.
and you'll be good. Like
Yep.
liquidate all of our real estate, just put all the money into index funds and follow his path, and you won't have to worry about monies. You'll be good. So
Exactly.
yeah, I love his book.
Oh my gosh, that's the perfect thing to put. Now I want to put that in my will. Like, yeah, everyone gets sent a cop that knows me gets sent a copy of this book and is forced to read it. That'd be the dream because that
Yeah.
book changes lives. And it, like, after you read it, I just listen to people like investing in like tech stocks and all this stuff, and I'm like, that's a lot of effort that is extremely unnecessary given the statistics.
Yeah.
And
Well,
my playground is
we'll
real
put that
estate.
in the show notes too. So sorry, go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, I said my playground is real estate. I don't need to do anything fancy on the index funds because real estate
Yep.
historically, if the harder you work, you can like actually get better returns. So
So I'll put the link to the book in the show notes for folks that want to check it out and pick it up. But on to question number 2, what's your favorite real estate related resource? So blog, book, podcast.
So I talked about kind of the first couple books I read, and so the person that really truly hooked me on real estate is Paula Pant, and so she does
Yeah.
the Afford Anything podcast, and I absolutely got obsessed with her because she is a lady who wasn't handy and didn't know anything about DIY and kind of figured out what she could and then outsourced what she didn't know how to do and like paid contractors and built like a small reasonable portfolio and talked about how people in real estate are debt loving weirdos and like leverage lovers, and it just spoke to my like former Dave Ramsey roots, and I was just hooked because I was like, well, I'm not handy, like I need someone to like, I needed this husband to like renovate my houses with, or I needed this partner, and I always felt really dependent on a significant other. And then I realized I'm like, well, I'm running all the numbers. I'm managing all the humans. Like I'm having to like manage a person that isn't showing up to like do renovations. Like I can do this with a contractor too. And he somewhat has to listen to me to get paid. So that might be easier.
Yeah.
So, I think learning that I didn't need to like know how to fix things to do it was really empowering. And so I'm obsessed with all of her stuff. So,
Awesome. And we'll link to her podcast and show too in the show notes. All right. So question number 3, what's been your favorite travel destination so far?
definitely the Cayman Islands. So I learned how to scuba dive and went scuba diving there, and it is amazing. And I also liked the fact that, like, if you go walk on the beach, like, people don't have machine guns. Like, it just feels safer. I've been to a few places where it feels a little dicier, and it's just very comfortable, like, to be there, and it's just fascinating. Very easy to get around. There's all different kind of sites, and the water is phenomenal. So, by far my
Awesome.
favorite place I've been.
All right. Question number 4, what's next on your travel vacation list?
Ooh, that is a good question. So right now I have like 2 trips planned, but just United States, because COVID makes everything a little weird. So I'm a little nervous to go outside US at the moment, just because I'd like to come back home. Um, and we don't know how that's gonna go. Don't think it'd be a problem, but you just never know. And so I'm going to Austin. I'm doing FinCon this year and going to Austin. I'm going with friends
Awesome.
to Austin in June. And then I'm also going down to Savannah to with friends as well this year. So kind of tour day US, but my dream is either South Africa or Australia is next on the list to do more scuba diving adventures. So,
Awesome. Awesome. And for folks that don't know FinCon, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I've been debating whether to go down to Austin. Last one I went to was when it was in DC,
mhm.
which I guess was 2 years ago, and then they canceled the one last year in California because of COVID. So might see you there.
Yes, yeah. So that's like the money nerd meetup. I've never been to FinCon before. I've always
Oh, you
thought about
haven't?
going, and so this is my year of like me living my best life. Like all the things I was like, should I do that? Like, no, I'm doing all the things now. So I already
Yeah.
have like babysitters booked and gonna do FinCon this year. So I'm super excited.
It'll be well worth it. All right. So question number 5, what's the biggest item on your bucket list that you have not accomplished yet?
Financial independence.
All right. I mean, that's a pretty good one to have
I
on
was
there,
gonna say
right?
that's honestly my biggest bucket list. I mean, I do like silly things like I don't know. Just for some reason, the first thing that came to mind was like all the hangers in my closet are the same because for some reason that's like
Yeah.
adulting thing. Like I wanted all the hangers
Type
to
A.
match.
You're definitely type A.
But I'm a very type A person. Like organization is my love language. So, but yeah, I mean, honestly, that would be awesome. So that's kind of my next goal is I always wanted to be financially independent by the time my daughter was in first grade. Um, so that's just kind of a milestone I've always had in my head. And so we'll see if I can make it happen, starting over and doing it again. So my lawyer says,
Awesome. I
well,
think
he
you can
has
do
no
it.
worries about it. He's excited to watch because he also is a real estate guy. So
Oh, cool.
yeah.
All right. So the 6th and final question, what is your favorite life hack?
Oh, we'll pause. Sorry, editor. What are life hacks people do?
Oh, one guy talked about 75 hard, a workout plan where you do 2 workouts a day for 75 days. It could be like LastPass, the security manager, to cold. Some guy said, cold showers every morning, whatever like makes your life a little easier.
Okay. Okay, so life hacks. Okay, so I've been on this big like outsourcing expedition just in my life. Like everything I don't enjoy, I outsource. So I bought my house hack lawnmower. Like have a guy that mows my lawn. I don't even own a lawnmower anymore. And so I did lawn mowing, I did snow plowing. It's been great. And so I outsource anything I don't love. But I think probably the biggest thing I've learned in this straight year of chaos is it's almost like an anti life hack where I'm like, I don't do like every day I just get up to do the best I can. And some days that looks like I exercise, and other days it looks like I kept a baby alive, like my toddler alive. She's almost 2 now, which is crazy. And I don't know, like I don't do like miracle mornings. Like I don't wake up early and like I get up and I'm on my phone and it's
Yeah.
terrible. And the toddler usually wakes me up before I'd like to be up, and I'm a night owl no matter how hard I try to wake up in the morning, and I still am like crushing dreams and like started a podcast, rebranded my blog. Like I'm doing all these things without checking all the boxes that people post online of looking like success. And I think that's a thing people don't hear enough. And I will say that's one amazing thing is Brandon Turner of Bigger Pockets has been talking about this a lot lately, where he's like, figure out what works for you. Because what doesn't work for me is I like to get up and check my phone and check my email and delete all of the crap I get, the morning spam, just so I can start my day fresh and know what's going on. And so, but every book ever will say you can't watch TV, you can't do all these things. And I'm like, I've watched 2 seasons of Outlander last month, but here I am. So you just, it's about balance. And I think most days I hustle and most weeks I hustle significantly more days than I don't. And you just, don't give up, I guess. I'm really good at perseverance and not quitting, but I'm really bad at consistency.
So, well, I think a good way to sum that up is outsource what you don't like and then figure out the routine that you're successful at, right? It's not the don't feel like you have to do the miracle morning. Yeah. Like maybe it's the miracle midnight to 1 a.m. if that's your jam.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think, it's just like about you don't have to have an Instagram worthy routine either in order to be successful, I think is, figuring out what works for you.
I love it.
Yeah.
So you hinted at it. I obviously know about it. You mentioned a blog, a podcast, Instagram. So if folks want to check you out, which they should, where's the best place for them to find you?
So I live on Instagram pretty much. You now know that I check it every single morning, first thing in the morning. I'm an Instagram addict. So Instagram's the best place to find me. So I'm under @Nerds Guide to FI or Nerds Guide to Financial Independence. I have a Facebook page that I'm rarely on. I have an email group now. I have a blog that I just moved onto a new platform. So I'm now onto Kajabi and I'm going to be doing some courses this year, hopefully. I have 2 that are cooking right now, mostly on helping people better screen tenants because I feel like I've been really lucky at finding amazing people and I'm kind of sharing that process as we go on because I think that's where a lot of newbie investors are terrified is like, I have to find a person to live in this house and I don't want to end up with a bad egg. So definitely go check out the website. And then I also have a podcast. They're all under the same name. So it's very easy to find. I think I'm on podcast number 22 now, which is exciting. So
cool. Well, we'll put the links for all your stuff in the show notes as well. So that way folks can find it if they're driving or watching somewhere and forget about it. They can just go to the show notes.
Pretty much what my podcast is, just interviewing my Instagram friends. So it's like the who's who of Instagram and real estate, apparently.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to be on the show with us and share your story. I mean, you've just gone through an awesome journey, and I'm really excited to see what's coming up for you over the next couple of years.
The future involves a yellow letter campaign, so we're going to see how that plays out. I've had a response back, and she has several properties, so I'm hoping that endeavor is fruitful in the future. So we'll stay tuned to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on.
It was a pleasure. Nice to meet you, Andrew.